All right. Good evening, Council and Administration. Tonight, for our March 8th meeting, we will call the meeting to order. First order of business is a moment of reflection, and then we'll get on to the approval of the agendas. So we'll take a moment. All right. First order of business or next order of business is the approval of the agendas. We have a consent agenda. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda? Councillor Monteith makes the motion. If there is no further discussion, we'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And moving on to the regular meeting agenda, we have a couple changes. Delegation item 1 is not able to make it tonight for family emergencies, so we wish them well and their family and hope to reschedule that at another time. And then under J, new business, number 9 will be a land sale motion that will be presented by administration. And I do believe that's the only amendments I've heard of. If I could get a motion to approve the agenda with those amendments. Councillor Wolstenholme makes that motion. We'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, we have a moment here for the good of council. If anyone has something they'd like to share, Councillor Dressler.
If I wouldn't mind indulging council and members of the audience. After the Queen Victoria's death in 1901, before that we adopted what it was called Empire Day. In 1902 we continued her birthday. And then of course it was changed after Lord Meath in 1916, which made it Commonwealth Day. I also want to indulge us as well. In 1898, we actually used to bring this as our curriculum in the schools and started first in Ontario. As we move on, I actually would like to say on the 28th of July, 1914, this was also the birth of our nation. Canada answered the call to the First World War that we indulged and sent our young men over to seas to fight. This was also our sons, our brothers, our uncles and fathers and husbands who volunteered to fight for freedom, justice against tyranny and oppression. But something else happened, the change of values of how we feel and women were treated today. They picked up the tools that were left behind those who went off to war, and they filled those roles typically done by men. They were not forced to do this, they volunteered. Proud, courageous women kept Canadian economy going while their husbands, fathers, and sons were off at war. They made uniforms, made boots, built ships, made rifles, and tended to the economic growth of Canada. So on behalf of myself, I would like to say Happy Commonwealth Day to all Canadians and a Happy National Women's Day to all the women in Fort Macleod, including the staff.
Very good. Thank you. All right, any other comments for the good of council? Councillor Edwards.
I just wanted to once again bring attention to how amazing our community is. There is a young family in our community that has a son with Angelman's syndrome and has been in need of some specialized equipment for that safety aspect and to allow him a quality of life. And the ask went out into our community to help, and it has come back. It's been amazing, just the response. Some individuals started an online auction, other people just donated items. I've had people call me and tell me they want to drop things off, and so they bring them and I take them over to the family. And it's just been overwhelming to see our community step up again and again for those in our community who need help. And it just, again, it just makes me so happy that we live in a community where we take care of our own and that we value each other. And when someone needs something, we're always there to support them. So thank you to the residents of Fort Macleod for that.
Amen. I would echo that for sure. Very good. Anyone else? All right. If there's no other comments for the good of council, we will maybe quick comments on the Chamber of Commerce AGM. It wasn't a large turnout to their AGM. They did have a guest speaker, John Barlow came down as well. So they did meet together at the Legion, and it was a good presentation and good turnout, and the chamber is doing well considering what's all going on. It would have been nice probably to have more people, but I think with the conditions that we're in, it was hard already to meet, so it was good to see. Okay, so if there's no other comments, we will carry on then to delegations, of which tonight we will have one, and we will pass it over to our Sergeant Brian Muha to make introductions and to present. So welcome to council tonight and look forward to hearing.
Thank you very much again for the invite. It's fantastic, all the things that are going on in town that are positive in nature, and we're trying to replicate that with all the work we're doing at the detachment level. So I just figured, first of all, I'll introduce my cohort here. This is Constable Christine Choi. Christine comes from Toronto. When did you get here? In July? End of July. So she's finished her recruit field training and now is learning the ropes here. So I don't know if you want to say hello there, Chris.
Chris, I'm from Toronto. Like I said, I just finished my training. I'm very new to Southern Alberta, and I'm new to everything here. So I'm learning still every day. I have a challenge every day, but I'm having fun. So, yeah.
So what's it like coming from Toronto to Fort Macleod?
Very different. Yeah, it's just culture shock every single day, every week. It's just different lifestyle. And
Well, welcome, and hopefully you're making yourself home, and I'm sure you're being treated well.
thank you.
Thanks.
So it's actually been nice. Chris is from Korean heritage, and we have Korean population here in town, although be it limited. But she's also helped out in some other detachment call-ins for assistance on working with clients, people that required statements or interviews or clarification on files that we had a language barrier. So real handy to have that around here. Okay, yeah, I'll move through this fairly quickly. And then we'll just leave some room for Q&A or discussion at the end. But I'll start with the current status of our detachment. Generally, we would have a regular complement of 7 members, which would be myself, the corporal, and 5 constables. Currently, we're at a surplus of 3 regular members. So we have myself, 2 corporals, and 7 constables. New members to the detachment are Corporal Kevin Kaspersky, Constable Liam Tidd, Constable Amanda Crawford, Constable Chris Choi, and Constable Amanda Gruette. They're all been here now for at least 6-7 months, some up to a year and a half. So with new members becomes a learning curve, especially when they're coming straight out of depot. Training and all sorts of things, and with COVID complicating everything, it's pretty hard to get them up and running where they should be, but we're working on it. So statistics wise, I was given some advice here recently, basically to stay away from statistics if I can, only because when I start talking statistics, mayor and council tend to start staring into the distance. So, but statistics do tell a bit of a tale. I had sent those out. Obviously, if there's any questions from you folks on those stats, let me know. But generally, as far as our crime gauge goes, most of our statistics are trending downwards and quite significantly from 2019 to 2020. That's persons crimes is at minus 71%, property crimes minus 33%, and other criminal code minus 75%. But with the property crimes, select issues are still existing. We still have B&Es coming in, theft of motor vehicle, theft under $5,000, even though those also are trending downwards. Yeah, current ongoing issues, the property crimes are still there. Chris can vouch for that. Her last set of shifts, she was just completely, actually this current set of shifts, she's been completely decimated with property crimes calls for service. Again, as we know from the past, it's highly connected to our drug trafficking and our drug trade. I read a report here the other day for Alberta that methamphetamine was at the top of the list for Alberta. Opioids were second, cocaine third. As you get further away from Vancouver or Toronto, it tends to change a little bit. But for us, our methamphetamine is the highest, biggest issue going on. The opioids, of course, tend to be critical because people die from the overdoses, right? So we haven't had a lot going on here, but I still know that out on Piikani Nation and Blood Nation, they're having their issues there with overdoses. So provincial traffic enforcement will always remain an issue here just because of the nature of where we are and the highways coming in and out. So again, there are ongoing issues. We have had an upsurge over the past few years in mental health related calls. I don't know what's going on there, but those are difficult calls to deal with. You don't necessarily, go into those things thinking that you're going to have to go hands-on with somebody or use force, but sometimes it happens, sometimes not. With the political climate right now, with all the defunding police ideology and stuff, it's really interesting for us to deal with those situations. So we're always training to de-escalate, and I think that's for the better. But yeah, mental health calls seem to be rising, and COVID probably a big part of that. So, because of the ongoing issues, I think our crime prevention initiatives or data to action initiatives that we were working through last year at our detachment level, they should continue. There's no reason to stop. I think we've seen successes in our statistics. So that's something that we'll probably continue on with. And those are such things as targeting crime hotspots, crime events, offender management, PROS data center, callback unit. These are terms that you may have heard sort of off and on over the past year, especially coming from higher above me in some of the meetings that you have been in. The crime prevention through environmental design, I really still want to focus on that as much as I can. So Miranda, if we can continue to work on that. Securing property, natural surveillance, territorial reinforcement, maintenance of property, and absence of surveillance and CPTED practices prove challenging for our investigations, and would help us to increase our positive clearance rates on our investigations. So that gets me to the annual performance plan for this coming year. It starts April 1st for us. Our fiscal year is April 1. So this is our time right now for community engagement and consultation. A huge priority on the part of the commanding officer of the division, Curtis Zablocki. They've come out with a blank slate this year. They haven't given us any priorities from above through the RCMP. So they're really just saying, you go out and consult, you go out and have community engagement, and whatever you get back from them is what you want to be doing. So that's really opened the books for us. And so such things as, or consultation as the town of Fort Macleod, obviously, our Safe Communities Task Force, our town hall meetings, our virtual ones, our bylaw enforcement talking to Wes there. Discussions with the MD of Willow Creek. We have Crime Prevention Action Team, or CPAC. Actually, it's committee. Citizens on Patrol, and such things as a community profile update that Constable Choi has done for us, where she's visited quite a few businesses along 12th Street, or 12th Street, sort of get an idea of what sort of issues they're dealing with down there. And something new this year for our APP is an accountability piece, accountability to stakeholders. And that basically tells us that our annual performance plan quarterly updates will be transmitted to communities by commanders via a newly designed reporting template. So it's not just going to be me talking about it. It should be something that comes to you in a documented form. And that'll be like quarterly updates to the progress that we're having on all of the initiatives that we undertake for our APP. So just better reporting, better communication, better consultation, and consultation not just with governing bodies, but with the community at large. So that's what we're really trying to hope for this year. And so my end piece here is we're really looking for ideas on priorities. I mean, we do believe that from the past we have a handle on some of the priorities that we should and will continue, but you never know. There's new things that happen, new things that come up that maybe we're not, we've got a little bit too much tunnel vision and we're not really seeing a bigger picture. So we want all of that inclusion as well. If people see things that maybe we're just not seeing, and that should be created as priorities for us. And yeah, crime prevention strategies, or whatever else that might apply. So that just leaves me with, we're really looking for input from council and beyond with respect to our priorities this year. And it's kind of an open slate. Although again, there are things that we already know are issues, and we already know some of those crime prevention strategies that we've put in place previously have worked, and so we'll continue with some of those. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So maybe some feedback from an administration. How best do we give that feedback? Do we rely on you to mine that data, CO Keenan, or do we want to have a further discussion, perhaps in camera, or how best?
I'm not sure if in-camera is necessary. I think if council has some ideas tonight that you would like to share with Sergeant Muha, that would be appropriate. We talk on a pretty regular basis, so I do try and convey most of the concerns you raise at council meetings with regard to crime prevention to him. But if there's anything you'd like to see them continue to do, or anything new that we've perhaps missed, that would be very helpful.
I know last week I did hear from the COP that they very much appreciated the involvement of the RCMP in connecting, because I think that connection is pretty vital for them to feel like they have any value to combating crime and suspicious activities. So
Yeah, absolutely. And we are actually working with them, or at least subsets of the COP, almost on a daily basis. We're getting calls all the time. You know, this is happening. We try and get down and try and figure out what's going on. Vehicles driving, no plates, lots of little things that, although may not be high on a priority list, they're all connected to this drug underworld and this property crimes, you know, thing that's going on. So Paul is the liaison for our office with the COP, Paul Bedard, and he has, I believe, touched base with them already with respect to either attending their next meeting or at least getting feedback from them on what they think is a priority. Yeah.
Okay. And then also with that, some comments were made about, and I'm sure it's a struggle that you face all the time, is reoffending offenders that are back in town. Some of them, it's not healthy, it's not good, but that's something that's obviously a struggle for you and for them to be able to know how best to handle.
Yeah, I mean, the regurgitation of people in and out through our office, we have so much control over that. We basically have a time limit of 24 hours to either, well, to deal with them in our custody, and that's either meaning a release on our part or a release through the bail hearing process. Anything that goes through the bail hearing process really ends up out of our control. That's more of a higher court process or the next court process. So it is tough sometimes when you see, you know, legitimate criminal activity, legitimate criminal background, and then these people are getting released. But again, that's something that we have a tough time controlling. Now, migration of our criminals is interesting. Like, they come and go, they move in and out of town. Apparently, one of our main issues from a couple of years ago returned to town. Thankfully, one of our constables, who's fairly in tight with certain people in the community, got information about it and managed to do a search warrant on the motel room that they had been in. Although we didn't find very much in the search warrant, it was a wake-up call in that we know what's going on and we're on you. And at the end of the day, if we don't take people out of the community, at least we're disrupting their activities. And that's almost as important, because day-to-day living is difficult when you're constantly being monitored and taken to task, I guess, on how, you know, your criminal activity in town.
And then break-in entries, sometimes, like, when you watch Facebook, you hear comments, people walking through yards, back alleys, and it seems to go a bit in flow and ebbs, right? Are you seeing the same thing, or is it pretty constant?
Well, the B&Es, I mean, when you get 7 or 8 over the period of a month, it's hard to really find a pattern in that. So to me, it's fairly constant. The thefts is constant. Again, B&Es are something that happen a little bit less frequently. But yeah, ebbs and flows. Sometimes we get busier when the money is out there. So when people get paid, we tend to be busier on the drug side of it, or on the, you know, just things happening. But I don't know if there would be real patterns that I have come up with.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just a question. Are you seeing an uptick in cooperation from citizens to report, to just to work with you in an effort to try to assist in the de-escalation of crime?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, that's happening. We're getting calls all the time, especially in those areas where the neighborhood or the neighbors are really, really fed up with what's going on. We're getting a lot of calls. Some of them we can't have trouble acting on because we just don't have authority, but we do know what's going on, and it builds a better picture for us, a more clear picture of how they're operating, which then ties into other things like our Safe Communities Task Force and other agencies that can maybe do a little bit more. Yeah, but yeah, definitely people are calling.
Councillor Edwards?
I know there's been a real positive sense in the community from the town halls that have been held, and the information that's been shared there has been very valuable. Something I was wondering if maybe the town and the RCMP could work together on was like a tip of the week or something along those lines, where you could maybe just help continually remind people, you know, don't let your lights be burnt out outside. Make sure your yard has a fence. Mine doesn't. You know, it's hard to stop people from walking through your yard if you don't have a fence. You know, like those just little things that, you know, keep things maintained, and, you know, and then some commercial towards our business owners and things, maybe just some little tips, nothing that has to be overly done up or anything, but just keep continually reminding everyone that if we want to be part of the solution as well. And so there is some ownership on us as property owners to help lessen the accessibility to those who have not great intentions. So I was just thinking that that might be something that's easily shareable and a reminder to our residents.
Yeah, I think that's something we can certainly do. You know, maybe through Miranda and the website. It's easy, right? Yeah, almost like a mini media release, but not really through the media, and more geared to the population at large, for sure.
Yeah, just like an infographic thing almost, or
Yeah.
just a simple poster, you know, something
Yeah.
eye-catching that you throw out on social media that just reminds people to
Yeah, I think we can do that.
do their best. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Engelbos, did you have something? No? Okay. I had a quick question. I know COP is a little hard to run right now. Would you encourage more people to be involved in COP to help increase the coverage?
Yeah, I don't see any reason not to have more people involved. The more people that are interested and out there, the more eyes you have. And it's not just those ones that are in the car out there riding around. It's I think when you're connected to COP, you have sort of this group mentality of trying to, prevent crime. And a lot of the people that are involved there, they're watching, they're looking, you know, and they can have internal training within the COP to, you know, what are the things to look for? What are we experiencing? You know, and absolutely, I would promote that.
And you still do ride-alongs, right?
Yes. Yeah, generally we're not supposed to have friends with us. Like, but obviously if it was somebody from council, or I know we're doing ride-alongs with Fish and Wildlife now because their mandates are changing slightly to what they call a rapid response, where they're going to be able to come to calls that we are dealing with, whereas before they wouldn't. That's a provincial mandate change, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying we weren't friends, so you could take us along, because we aren't friends.
Yeah, well, I mean, riding with me is going to be pretty boring because you'll be sitting at my desk. But absolutely, if somebody wants to experience what's going on, we will get you out there for sure.
Well, any other comments, questions? Seeing none, we want to thank you for coming out tonight with your colleague, and we wish you and your team the very best. And thumbs up and good job. All right, we are going to carry on to next portion, public hearing portion, of which we have two bylaws coming tonight. We will start by opening the public hearing for bylaw 1926, which is our water utility services bylaw. If I can get a motion to open the public hearing for that bylaw. Councillor Dressler makes the motion. All in favor? Carried. And perhaps I'll ask our CEO, Sue Keenan, to introduce the bylaw and see if there's anything you wanted to present, or our Director of Operations.
I have every confidence in our Director of Operations to present.
Hello? There we go.
Just
It's not my nights.
it's off and on.
Hello? There we go. All right, let's try this again. So we're tonight for bylaw 1926, which is the water utility services bylaw. We are asking council to open the public hearing, call for a continuance of the bylaw in order for the bylaw public hearing to be reconvened on March 22nd. Just reason being is to allow more time for residents to take in the information, ask any questions of council or staff during that time, and then we can respond to their concerns or questions accordingly.
Very good. I think there was some email communication that's attached in our package. We have that for consideration. And was this advertised in the newspapers already? Yeah, I didn't look too hard for it, so I'm assuming it's in the utility bills as well coming up. Okay, I didn't look at last week's paper yet. So that's good, and that'll be in there this last week, and then, okay. Very good. So being this is a public hearing for bylaw 1926, anyone here wishing to speak for or against a bylaw may be able to do that at this time. I do not believe we have anyone here wishing to speak for or against. So we will you want to motion and to recess public hearing for bylaw 1926 instead of, yes. Okay. So if I can get a motion from council to recess the public hearing for bylaw 1926 to reconvene on March 22nd. Motions on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on then to public hearing for bylaw 1927, which is very same, very much similar, sewer bylaw amendment. If I can get a motion from council to open the public hearing for bylaw 1927.
So moved.
Councillor Dressler makes that motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Director of Operations, Adrian, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Kind of. There we go.
I think it's your mask.
It's not.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Wow.
It's weird.
It's on now.
Hello? Okay, so similar to the last bylaw, we are just asking that council open the public hearing and then call for a continuance to reconvene on March 22nd. Same idea, just giving people more time to take in all the information.
Okay. And if all goes well, then we would plan to pass the bylaw on the 22nd, correct? And then increases would come into effect April 1st. So motion to call for a recess to the public hearing and to reconvene on the 22nd. Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any further discussion or questions on the motion? Not much on the motion, sorry. So call to question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, we are moving right along to new business. Item 1, bylaw 1928, adding a use to our zoning districts. We will pass this over to our Director of Operations, Adrian Pedro, for introduction.
Thank you, Council. So bylaw 1928 is to define community resource facility as a discretionary A use in the land use districts listed in the submission. We're also asking that Council schedule the public hearing to be held on March 22nd.
Okay. Is anyone prepared to make the motion on this agenda item? Councillor Dressler makes the motion as per the recommendation.
Yes, Your Worship, as per the recommendation from administration.
Okay, so this is first reading only for a bylaw to add community resource facility as discretionary use to 4 land zoning districts in the town of Fort McLeod, and to schedule a public hearing for March 22nd at 7 p.m. Is there any questions, comments, debate on this bylaw? Seeing none, I will call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Carrying on to second item under new business, J2, which is a Manning Avenue Industrial Revised Cost Estimate, and I will pass this over to, our Director of Operations, Agent Pedro again.
Okay, so here before you is a revised cost estimate for Manning Avenue Industrial. So as council will remember, in the 2021 capital budget, we presented a figure of $821,000 for that project. However, there was a bit of a miscommunication, I'll call it, between the town and our engineering consultant. Unfortunately, there was a scope of work excluded from that number, although I thought it was included. So this submission is for that new revised amount, inclusive of all costs, including subdivision.
Okay, and this is, just so we're clear, once it goes to tender, it comes back and the cost is way lower, way higher. We would still come back to council for approval at that time, correct? Final approval.
Right. So depending on if it's lower, it wouldn't necessarily come back. That's just
Okay.
sort of money in the bank, if you will. And similar, if it did happen to come over, which I'm not expecting it to, just given some of the contingency we have built in there, then yeah, we would have to come back to council for additional funds.
Okay.
If I can also add to this one, you'll notice the site plan that was included in this figure. It's changed a bit from when council last saw it. So there's now 9 lots as opposed to the original 8 lots. Just reason being, there is an overhead power line that crosses the 3rd and 4th lots from the left. So we've had to split up that lot configuration. So as a side note, if council's okay with this layout, we'll proceed accordingly.
Okay, I don't know that there's a lot that we could adjust on this. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on this agenda item?
Yes, Your Worship, I would like to make a motion as per the recommendation that was presented to us. The council approves the revised cost estimate for the Manning Avenue Industrial Lot Development Project as laid out and shown.
Okay. Would it be fair to say at this time that we can add to the motion to advertise all 3 projects that we have planned so that they can be reviewed, discussed, or at least provide people the opportunity to see what we're planning before work continues? CEO Keenan?
So based on that discussion item and our previous discussion earlier this evening, so it would be an opportunity to provide information to specifically those businesses in the industrial area. It would not be necessarily a formal public engagement process, but we would encourage any of those owners, if they had any feedback they'd like to provide, that they're more than welcome to submit it.
Okay. Is that something you would like included in the motion, or would you?
Yes, please.
Is that something you would be in favor of adding to your motion, Councillor Dressler?
Yes, Your Worship, I have no objections to adding the recommendation here from CAO Keenan to my motion.
Is there any other discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Carrying on then to item 3, Downtown Signage Improvement Plan. Our Director of Operations will speak to this one.
Thank you, Council. So as you'll see before you is a signage improvement plan for the downtown area along Main Street between 3rd Ave and Highway 3, as well as along 2nd Ave and 3rd Ave adjacent to Main Street, so for the first block going north and south. This was spurred on when we received a number of complaints from area businesses and landowners. We did our investigation, did our formal assessment, and come up with this signage plan to improve the area. So if council approves, we will proceed with installing these signs. The budget for this would be out of our operating sign budget. So,
CEO Keenan.
Just one bit of information I'd like to add is that the Chamber of Commerce was advised of the meetings that we were having with several of the key business owners. They were also asked for their input. 2 weeks ago, they provided very favorable input on behalf of all the businesses on Main Street. So I believe we've done our due diligence and we have something that's going to be workable for everyone.
That is helpful for sure. All right, is anyone prepared to make a motion on this agenda item? Councillor Nagbos. So moved. Further questions? Councillor Orr.
I would have to, first I'd be interested to hear more details about the nature of the concerns that were raised and where specifically. I have some major concerns about the posting and installing of, 22 new signs, largely along 2nd Avenue and what we refer to as Main Street. I have some real concerns about the impact that that's going to have on the historic nature of that, those 2 stretches of road. And for that reason, I would be looking for some other way that we can communicate what obviously needs to be communicated, but to have that many new signs installed on Main Street, I just wonder about what the impact of that is going to be. You know, I appreciate that business owners, they want to have parking outside of their facility, and I don't know what the nature of the problem is there as far as, the 2-hour parking limit, whether we have residences that are parking there all day. I'm just wondering if there isn't some other solution to look at, because that is a lot of very modern signage peppered along our historic streets. So I have those very strong concerns.
Adrian, would you like to respond to that?
sure. So in terms of the concerns from adjacent landowners, one you kind of touched on is the residents in the area kind of parking along the street and not moving within that 2-hour window. So there was a bit of an issue with parking availability in the area. So this plan tries to negate that. In terms of sort of what we'll call in the industry sign clutter, I don't feel like that's quite a concern. The post spacing on Main Street isn't quite ideal, so we'd like to have the signs a little bit further apart, but in order to avoid putting up additional posts in the area, we've kind of stuck with the current posts. The 2-hour parking sign is actually already there. We're just installing more of them to make it more enforceable, because that's the issue we have now. So going west on Main Street, just west of 3rd Avenue, we have that 2-hour parking sign currently there. But from an enforcement standpoint, that's very difficult to do, because if that sign isn't near or adjacent to where people are parking, it's very hard to enforce. Hence the need to have more signage along the road. So it's a tricky area. I don't think there's necessarily a better option to deal with it. information and regulatory signage is kind of the first step in trying to deal with these barriers. Other ways is like sort of a step 2, which would be actually changing physical layout of the road and try and accommodate different parking movements that way. But that's obviously much more costly and a whole different exercise. But definitely open for some input.
Councillor Dressler.
I think I'm more to speak on to this and fill in a little bit of the gaps for Adrian. Regulatory signs are governed by the province, and of course enforcement, whether it be municipal or provincial enforcement, whether they also the RCMP follow under the sign regulation, which means that the sign that is posted has to meet the requirements. There are many signs along First Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, and Main Street that are out of date and can be fought within provincial court as not a regulatory sign. So this was on the back burner when I was the peace officer for the town of Fort Macleod. So I think it's about time that we replace some of these old ancient signs that actually have no enforcement.
The 3 bollards that would be put in between the Legion and the next door building, I'm assuming then that's not a registered roadway, correct? That would be strictly a gap in the property, so we don't want any traffic through there. Is that the intent?
Right, so that piece is a titled piece of property that the town owns.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's not an open public road allowance.
Oh, town owns that piece?
Yes. So we own that. Currently, there's an issue with vehicles parking there, like driving through there. So in order to deter that movement, we're just going to block it off with bollards. The advantage of that is it still facilitates access with pedestrians or emergency services in that alleyway. So 2 birds with 1 stone there.
Okay. Any other questions? The other comment I had is those large parking signs north of Main Street. Have the posts been changed on those? Because I know I wouldn't want to park downwind of those signs.
Yes, yeah, we would change those. So the existing sign on the west side of the parking lot is not ideally installed, we'll put it that way. So we would put in something more robust.
Yeah, we have to remember our wins. Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Orr, did you have any further thoughts? Or?
Perhaps you could just comment on the need for the number of 2-hour block restrictions, the number of signs. I look on the list and I see, or on the diagram, and I see we've got 2 signs that are on the corner of each building. So they've got to be no more than 20 meters apart from each other. Do we really have to have that many signs in order to communicate? And again, I just wonder, the cost, and I'm not talking dollars and cents here, but the cost of clutter in order to achieve what we're hoping to achieve. And whether we really need to have that many signs along our Main Street. Is there some kind of criteria that led you to determine that there needs to be that many along the Main Street?
So ideally, sign spec kind of dictates about 50 meters per sign.
15?
Anywhere between like 50 and about 35. The whole reason that there's more here is because there's really unfortunate post spacing. The more that we have in there, the more that it's going to be visible. So we can
exactly, that's the problem.
Right.
On the one hand.
Right.
And again, I'm trying to get a handle on what's the magnitude of the problem we're trying to solve here. If it's some frustration with a few people that are ignoring this, let's talk to the few people. You know, I know that that's not a blanket approach, and we can do the blanket approach. But again,
So from an enforcement standpoint, it makes it difficult.
I'm very familiar
so-
with the enforcement issue.
Right, no, and I appreciate the concern.
And I'm also mindful of the limitations of enforcement, you know, in that respect. And sometimes in a smaller community, we can accomplish our goals in other ways, you know, by simply talking to and dealing with the issues. If it's all out of town people that are continuing to offend, and then obviously we need to deal with a more blanket approach. If it's our local community, we communicate, and we're just trying to deal with that specific issue. I just wonder if there isn't some other ways. But that's fine. I appreciate what you're trying to do here. I think everybody knows where I stand on it.
CEO Keenan?
I just wanted to speak to Councillor Orr's comment. We did have 2 substantive meetings with 3 major property owners off of 2nd and Main who have residents living above their buildings, which has been a concern for years. We've gotten some agreement from the 3 of them to provide written notification to the residents that they can no longer park in front of the businesses on 2nd, 3rd, and down Main Street, and that there are several town-owned parking lots in the vicinity, not more than half a block away, that has been designated to them to park with still the ability to live downtown. We do have continuous problems with several not business owners, but residents that park for long periods of time. There have been efforts to communicate that message to them. To beef up enforcement, we have to have the correct signage, we have to have it properly placed, and we need it for evidence to allocate tickets. So far in the last couple of weeks, our bylaw officer has issued quite a few warning tickets to those people that have been parking over that 2-hour timeline. But we need to do a bit more. And honestly, I think we as administration are doing everything that we can. And so much so that we've gotten the chamber involved to help us and to get that message out to the businesses.
So thanks for that explanation, Ms. Keenan. So simply from an enforcement perspective, if we have an issue with individuals where we've given them a number of warning tickets, advising them that this is a 2-hour zone and that they've exceeded that, and then eventually we actually give them a ticket, the fact they're going to be hard pressed to argue that they didn't know it was a 2-hour parking zone if we have evidence of all those warning tickets that have been given. And so there again, there's a means to address that and to get a conviction, assuming that's going to make a difference for those individuals, without the need of extensive signage. I appreciate that you've talked to the building owners and that you're trying to deal with that real issue that the business owners would have with residences above them taking those or occupying those parking spaces. So I appreciate that kind of initiative. That's great.
I'm curious then on the large parking areas, free public parking, is there a time limit on that parking? Is that something that needs to be put on the sign? Like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days?
Well, our bylaw stipulates, I believe I want to say 72 hours. I'm not 100% sure on the parking in our parking lots. Is it 72?
I do know at one time we had talked about putting a no overnight parking even there too, because we did have a couple of residents who were perpetually parking not nice vehicles there, and there was some contention with the fort and where they were parking, and but I don't know that we ever came to a conclusion of what was best served for the area. We didn't want to limit any tourists from, if they need a place to park overnight type thing. I don't know that we had a conversation, but I don't think there was any conclusion to it.
I think like the 72 hours would make sense. That way, I think having it on the sign would help perhaps that problem as well. Okay, good discussion. Any further comments? Motion is on the floor to approve as presented. I'm assuming this is all covered by operating labor and town employees, so it's strictly costs that we're looking at right now. A signage cost.
Signage costs as well as the number of signs and their locations.
Okay, any other, if there is no other questions, the motion stands as per the recommendation, Councillor Dressler?
So did we want to change the green sign? Is that what you're saying? That we
I
wanted
don't
to
think
put
that
an
needs to
hour
be in the
limit on it?
motion, that's something administration can consider, I would say.
Well, if we're approving for the sign, you're gonna have to put a sign up and then take it down to put a time limit on it? Or you're gonna leave enough space to add your time limit? If we're gonna make a motion on a sign, and it's gonna be cost
So
a metal sign, that'll cost money again.
we can, no, I mean,
The signs are made.
two things there. So if we are going to put that 72-hour restriction, I would imagine we would have to change the bylaw. So that would be step one. Step two, we could certainly add on to those signs because the way their layout is now, there is some room there. So we can always actually just have decals made for it. So if we needed to.
CEO Keenan?
I have a little bit of a concern with the 72-hour notice, and we get into a little bit of trouble here because we do have significant number of residents that live downtown. And so if we're going to change the bylaw and implement that, then I think we need to really look at a sticker program for the residents, whereby they have something that they have in their cars that allows them to park in those parking lots as per what MPC approved them to do. So we need to not forget about them.
I agree. Councillor Vanagamos?
I believe there is a certain amount of time before a vehicle becomes abandoned on public property, and I think it is 72 hours. Is that not the case?
It's 24 hours, actually, if you look under the traffic. Oh, but the amendment that we did in the old traffic bylaw was the 24 hours.
Okay, so we have the motion. I don't believe there's any amendments to the motion. Everyone's clear on the motion. If there is no further discussion or debate, we will call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Carrying on to grants to organizations, we will have our Director of Community and Protective Services speak to this agenda item.
Thank you and good evening, Council. Back in January at the Council Retreat, Council will recall that we had a brief discussion on the grants to organization program and allocation of funds. There was a request for additional information for some year-to-date information for some of these groups. That information was provided via email to Council, and through additional conversation, Council and Administration has allocated the amount shown, and we believe that that's accurate, accurately reflects the needs of the organizations as well as Council's ability to approve funding within the 21 budgeted amounts. So tonight we are looking for Council's formal approval to the amounts listed in the submission.
Thank you very much. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on this agenda item? Councilor Monteith makes the motion. Any discussion, clarification, or questions? Debate? Nothing? All right, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Carrying on now to emergency preparedness. We will pass this over again to our Director of Community and Protective Services.
If Council will recall, back in, I think it's a typo there, 2027, Council approved the town of Fort McLeod's emergency plan and able to participate there. So that was back in January of 21. Actually, I believe it might even have been January 2020. We applied with the MD and our regional partners, Stavely, Nanton,
and Claire's Home to participate in a regional exercise. It's quite a big event. It's going to be a big mock disaster at the end of it all. Timelines have shifted on that, as the report states, and we are now moving to September 22 to be the actual mock disaster event. Building up to that, there's a few things that we need to have in order, one of them being 2 council members appointed to sit on the steering committee, and so tonight we are asking that council appoints 2 members that would be willing to sit on the steering committee. It's not going to be overly rigorous or time consuming. There's a few specific things that council members that are appointed will have to attend, but majority of it is left to the planning committee, and then certain training activities, the council members would then attend and participate in those.
Councillor Dressler.
Since I have lacking on committees that I sit on, I would like to put my name in, please, and thank you.
Lacking committee appointments. What are you talking about?
If I could also just, I will be bringing a bylaw for emergency management to council that also has 4 appointments for council. Mayor and 3 councillors will have to sit on an advisory committee for that as well. So there's probably a good indication that if there could be some overlap with this, and then also the committee that's appointed through the bylaw, and that will come probably within the next 2 meetings.
Any other comments? Interests? Councillor Edwards?
And this is something that I would be interested in participating in as well. I think
Okay.
it's a valuable exercise and something that we need to be prepared for.
Okay. Anyone else have comments? I don't know that it's critical at this point that the mayor's part of this subcommittee, correct?
For this one, not so much. The one that is coming in the bylaw, the mayor is chair of, is the way that the bylaw states, and so it is the mayor and then three councillors. So that one will be more, it's a quarterly met committee meeting, advisory committee meeting. So it's not still very time consuming, but yes, you would be involved in that one.
Okay. That's fine by me. If the 2 councillors that want to sit, that would be fine on my end. So if anyone wants to make a motion on that.
Who's going to be primary?
Primary?
Arm wrestle?
So the alternate would only if someone can make it, correct?
I believe that there's going to be one orientation type session that we would have both at, and then after that, it would be as needed and whoever's available to attend.
Okay. Well, sales pitch? Kidding. It doesn't matter to me. Like, you guys can figure it out too. If we make a motion, then
Why don't we make a motion as per the recommendation
Yeah.
and leave it to Councillor Dressler and Edwards to determine who would be the primary?
are you too good with that, or do you want us to decide?
I'm fine either way. I just. Rock, paper, scissors, right on live, right?
So I imagine on the school side, Christy, do you get involved in quite a bit emergency planning with?
As far as the transportation department goes, yeah, we're actually working on our plan and stuff right now in that department, but
It somewhat relates.
Mhm.
And
we're
Councillor-
also on standby as far as the school division's concerned, so all of the buses are on standby if there ever is a municipal need for evacuation.
right,
So our
they're
buses and drivers are,
accessible.
and ready for use should a municipality need them.
If we need to decide now, then I would long as you two are good, then we'll pass a motion just to accept the two, and you guys can figure out who's primary and who's secondary. Who is prepared to make the motion? Councillor Monteith makes the motion. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. That was a hard one. So funny. All right, item number 6, 2021 Willow Creek Foundation Requisition. Our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck.
There's two recommendations. Do we need two motions?
Yes, there was a budget.
No, I think that was an old one. That's back from 20.
Oh,
That's just information from a previous
Correction, yeah, the 2027.
2020. Okay, now we are on to the requisition. So, Chris Holbeck, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Council. The first item that we're talking about tonight is the 2021 Willow Creek Foundation requisition. The recommendation is for Council to refer the requisition to our 2021 operating budget, where I've already incorporated it. So it's not a big shock or anything. I just wanted Council to know because the foundation has given us some good information this year regarding the percentage increase and why there is an increase, and it's based on our equalized assessment going up. It wasn't because their deficit went up. Their deficit is the same as it was the prior year, and just our equalized assessment went up, so we get a bigger portion of the requisition.
Very good. Anyone prepared to make a motion on this? Councillor Orr?
Yes, as recommended.
Okay. So I did have a question. So are you suggesting then that our assessment, we haven't seen it yet, the assessment for the town of Fort Macleod's gone up 2%?
This is our equalized assessment, so this is the one that the province gets, and then equalizes it between municipalities, and then that's how they determine what our education tax and our requisitions are going to be from our lodges. So it's a little bit different than just the regular assessment that we get from our assessors. It's the assessment that we get from our assessors that you guys are going to see at Committee of the Whole next week is not equalized by the province. It's just the raw numbers from our assessors.
So essentially the cost per dollar of equalized assessment hasn't changed.
Right.
Okay. All right. Motion is on the floor. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Moving on to 2020 surplus allocation. Our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck.
All right, here's the second one tonight. As you guys know, this is the time of year where our auditors finish up our financial audit for the past year and come to council with our financial statements. Calvin Scott will be coming to the next council meeting. We actually got done our audit a little bit early this year. They were not allowed to come on site because of COVID. So most of the information and the sampling and the work was done by staff, and we just scanned it and uploaded it to their website. So it went quite well this year. I can imagine that probably in future years they're not going to come on site unless they absolutely have to, and that we'll be doing all of this electronically. Is it working? There, oh, see? Okay, get it a little bit away from me. Yeah, she likes me better. All right, so I've kind of mentioned to you guys that Calvin Scott from Avail is coming on the 22nd with our financial statements. So as part of that, those are going to be final financial statements. And so the prelude to that is that they get the statements ready. They tell us what our draft surplus for the last year is. And then I come to council and say, this is what our annual surplus is, and we allocate it to reserves. So that's what we're doing tonight, is we're gonna talk about our 2020 surplus allocation and the 2021 reserve optimal balance adjustments. Yay! I know, I made a PowerPoint presentation because I gave you like a whole bunch of paperwork and 5 spreadsheets, and I felt really bad. So, I guess I'll just kind of go through, I won't go through the pretty presentation right as yet. So in 2021, they're estimating that we have a surplus of about $1,085,301. So my recommendation tonight to council is that of that $1.085301 million, we allocate out $1,070,000 of it to our reserves. And the rest that's left just falls through to our annual unrestricted surplus, and it just falls through and becomes part of unrestricted surplus for the town. The $1,070,000 goes into our reserve accounts, our operating and our capital reserve accounts, and those are pockets of money that we have designated to operating and capital projects. So I guess for what we're going to talk about is, I guess, the second page that you guys have in your presentations, not the pretty PowerPoint one, but the raw data one, is the draft statement from Avail that Calvin's going to come and talk about on the 22nd. And that's where it shows that we have the $1,085,000 accumulated surplus for 2020 financial audit. So that's the number that we're starting with. So from that number, this year it's a little bit different because we have done a financial reserve policy, and we have set out our capital and operating reserves, and we have set out the regulations for us to do any kind of adjustments or transfers within those capital and operating reserves. And how we set the beginning balances for those operating and capital reserves was, I have formulas for what's called optimal balances. And so last year we set the optimal balances. I allocated out what we had in reserves to the new titled reserves with using the optimal balance formulas. So every year I have to recalculate that because things change and capital budgets are farther out than they were last year. So I redo my calculations every year. And as part of us determining what we're going to do with the annual surplus, part of it is I make the calculations for what we need in reserves to be at our optimal balances. And then part of the surplus allocation is adjusting those balances to what I need them to be. And then whatever's left over after we do our adjustments can go to wherever council wants it to go. So because of the timing that we've got the audit done earlier than I had anticipated, I've asked for the $1,070,000 to be allocated to the optimal balances, and the calculations are all in here, and I'm sorry to overwhelm council with so many spreadsheets and numbers. But I did all the recalculations for 2021 for the reserves. So those numbers are in there. So of the $1,070,000, I've requested that about $441,000 is for getting the reserves back up to the correct optimal balances. So once you take that off our surplus, we still have $648,023. And I am recommending to council that we don't have to figure out what we're doing with it tonight because Calvin's coming and he needs to kind of just know where the surplus is going for his financial statements on the 22nd. So if we could just take that the excess surplus and just take it as a pool of money and just set it in a holding account in capital reserves for tonight. And then we can come back when there's a little bit more time and we thought about it. And then we can decide where we want to allocate that $648,000 to operations or capital, or you can put it all back into internal financing. It doesn't really matter. But I know you guys would probably like to talk about it and think about it, and then I think everyone's got their own ideas how we could spend that additional money we've got this year. So that's the gist of it in a nutshell.
Councillor Monteith?
Refresh my memory, but do we not still have land sale reserve account?
We do not.
Okay, just out of curiosity, how much of the profit is land sales?
So of our $1,070,000 surplus, about 420 is our net gain on land sales from that department.
Mr. Mayor? I'm just reading numbers. Councillor.
Maybe I could just drill down into that a little bit more for the benefit of all those who are here and those who may be listening in the simplest of terms. Can you define how this surplus is obtained, how it's calculated? When you talk of this 2020 unrestricted surplus, would you just explain how that is arrived at?
So our 2020 surplus is calculated via total revenue minus total expenses, and it's not including any capital funding that we get for our capital programs. It does include. It doesn't include amortization either. So it takes out the non-cash amortization. It takes out any capital funding. There's no capital expenditures in there. So it's just revenue in and paid expenditures out.
So then just to respond, if we've got that kind of surplus, shouldn't our citizens' taxes be lower? Just explain that.
So
Can't we do that when we go through the statements? Because we're going to be going through that at that time.
I'm just looking for an overarching explanation. And maybe that's inappropriate. That's a question that I would think a citizen may have.
So every year we budget to zero. So we budget to zero with amortization in our budget and no capital expenditures. So at the end of the year, if there's been any efficiencies, this year we had COVID, there's not probably one large thing that at the end of the day we come out with $1 million surplus. It's a whole bunch of smaller things that we don't anticipate, because when we do budget, we budget for a zero. It's in our budget. We have to budget to zero. So I budget for zero every year. So when we come out and we have this $1 million surplus, I'm always looking through the statements, trying to figure out how did I budget so badly, but I don't. And it's just a whole bunch of little things. And of course, there's land sales in there. I don't budget land sales. Land sales department, I budget to zero. So it's kind of an unexpected thing. I hope we're going to sell land, but I don't know we're going to sell land. So when there's land sales, $500,000 of land sales, that adds to that surplus at the end of the year. And then maybe the other $600,000 or $500,000. It's a whole bunch of small things that throughout the year we just didn't do as much because of COVID, and we just saved money. I'm always, yeah, I always think that, oh my gosh, how could I have budgeted that badly? But I budget to zero, and then things happen. So there's not one big thing I can just even say that that's the cause of $1 million surplus. Sorry.
Well, 2/3 of it's rough, or 1/3, over 1/3, 40% is land sales revenue right
Yeah,
off the top,
40%
right?
is
So
land
it's
sales.
that 600,000 that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, I'm not taking issue with the process that we've done in the past. I was just looking for some explanation to be on the record as to how we might have achieved that. And so I appreciate that explanation.
So one other thing that's a huge impact to us as a municipality is our water and sewer plants. The money that the water and sewer plants generate as a utility, they run surpluses, and that feeds the mill rate. So that feeds keeping the mill rate quite low. So if they do well, and but behind taxes, that's our second largest revenue source in the town of Fort McLeod, are our water and sewer plants.
C.O. Keenan?
With respect to water and sewer, historically, any surplus we've gotten from that utility has gone back into general operational. We have not put aside any funding for future infrastructure upgrades and repairs. And we're trying to get to a point now with all these optimal reserves where we're actually putting money that we should have been historically putting money away for things like the pool renovation, for things like the water treatment plant upgrades, for things like underground infrastructure. And we're finally getting to that point now where Chris is addressing it. We're doing it through reserves. And Jim is absolutely correct. When you see the actual financial statements, there's a lot of little things, but it doesn't take long to add up to $600,000. And those things have been earmarked for reserves.
Okay, very good. And I'm sure we'll have more discussion on exactly where in reserve accounts things will go, correct? Right now you're looking for where that $1,070,000 is, that we approve transferring that to a reserve account.
Yeah, so it's the $1,070,000, and then if we can just put that one additional pot of money, that 648, into just one pocket, then we can have a discussion further on about where that's going to be divvied out to.
Okay. Is everyone, Councillor Monteith? Councillor Monteith makes a motion as per the recommendation. Okay. If there's no further discussion, and I'm sure we'll be having some more discussions once we get into mill rate discussions and all that fun stuff, so we'll call this motion to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, carrying on to item 8, Crow's Nest Pass President's Summit on Policing. C.O. Keenan.
Thank you, Mayor Fader. There is no formal submission on this. I just wanted to bring it forward tonight. Councillor Dressler and I had the opportunity in the last month to sit through 2 provincial summits on policing and what's happening across the province with policing. There's a lot of concern from municipalities like Crow's Nest Pass and others. And I'm a little concerned about this too, that there seems to be a bit of a fait accompli with this whole, we're going towards an Alberta provincial police force. And I don't know about Councillor Dressler, but I know with respect to some of the information we got, it seemed like AUMA was really pushing that agenda, that was the direction that we're headed in. It's my belief as your CAO that that is definitely not the direction I believe we should be heading in. I think Crow's Nest Pass, mayor captured it quite well. I would like to suggest to council, if you've had an opportunity to read it, that we do send a letter to the Solicitor General duplicating some of the concerns that Mayor Painter outlined in his letter with regard to this whole push for an Alberta provincial police force.
Councillor Dressler?
I did have that opportunity to sit in on those two webinar sessions. I was quite baffled at the construct that Mr. Madu had used OPP as one of their pilots to use as a provincial police force in their basic monetary funds to what they're operating at now at a cost. They did not include what it costs to build facilities, train police officers, equip them, and then, of course, the manpower. They were assuming that the RCMP would just kindly walk over to a provincial police force, no questions asked. And that was like, excuse me. So, yeah, I was quite baffled at that, and I was quite shocked that the provincial government would actually lean to that. So, kudos to Crow's Nest Pass for doing this, and I do not look at this as a positive for the province of Alberta, especially if they want to ramrod this quickly. This is not something that you take lightly.
Okay. So suggestion was that we make a motion to echo the comments made from Crozes Pass's mayor. We can simply support the mayor's position as well. Is that council's position, and who's prepared to make that motion?
Just one
Councillor
further
Orr?
question. Ms. Keenan had mentioned that it was her opinion that the AUMA was in support of and pushing this as well. So it seems to me that if we're opposed to that direction, we need to be communicating that directly to the AUMA, because the government is more likely to listen to the AUMA than to us individually. And so there's kind of a two-pronged approach there. I would certainly support a letter echoing the concerns of the Crow's Nest Pass mayor, but I would also like to make sure that the AUMA is very much aware of our position on that. And I would be in favor of that kind of a motion.
Yeah, unless we're missing something completely, right? I think if we don't have all the information, we need all the information. I haven't seen a lot of information for or against from council's position.
So during the webinar exercise, as I would call it, this gave opportunity for those that were sitting in to put in their comments and objections to a lot of things. A lot of it wasn't answered very correctly. A lot of it was just kind of, okay. Requests were done by the CAO and myself for a copy of the agenda. I have yet to see anything come from AMUA, even though a lot of the municipal governments asked for a copy of it, and a lot of what came down from the Solicitor General. So I think that shows already a negative side, that this was kind of not being listened to from a lot of there, because it was mostly based on the larger cities that are paying for their own policing, not rural communities.
Say Keenan?
Thank you, Mayor Fader. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Orr's comments, which I really did appreciate. I have made tremendous efforts on behalf of the town of Fort Macleod this past year and a half to convey our concerns through AUMA, as well as and along with my colleagues in rural Alberta. We have all been sharing the same message, and for whatever reason, and I can't really explain it except to echo Councillor Dressler's comments. AUMA is made up of member municipalities. The cities, of course, are the largest population base. They tend to seem to carry a big part of the vote here. And we're just the little wheel with the grease spinning, spinning, spinning. We have continued to lobby AUMA, ARMA, and that's for the rural communities, as well as the provincial government directly with regard to re-examining a provincial police force and making sure that they've got all the information that the citizens of Alberta need to have to make a good, sound decision moving forward with policing. And I don't believe they've done that.
So I don't believe a motion's been made on this. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on how we proceed? So a motion to present a letter echoing Croz's
Perhaps,
plan?
yeah, I could make a motion. So a motion to the effect that we instruct our CAO to continue to voice council's position to AUMA and ARMA, is that the right acronym? ARMA. And as well draft a letter expressing our concern to the Honourable Minister Casey Madhu along the lines of the letter of the Crowsnest past mayor.
Can you cut that down to like, I'm
I'm
kidding.
going to leave that for Miranda to cut down.
All right, so the motion's on the floor. I think we all know the intent of the motion. Is there any further discussion or questions? We'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And item 9, we have an item on our agenda. It's a land sales item, and our CEO, Sue Keenan, will present this to us.
Thank you, Mayor Fader. Tonight is a night to celebrate after having the old territorial courthouse on the market for 2.5 years, and with a little additional marketing and promotion that's been done over the last few weeks, we ended up with a couple of actually pretty solid bids that came in that council had an opportunity to discuss a little bit earlier this evening. It is with great pleasure that I put forward a motion tonight that council approve the full price offer made by Brian and Brenda Vanderval for the full $225,000 for the purchase of the old territorial courthouse and the lands that it sits on, and to instruct administration to move forward with that offer to ensure that they have the necessary parking that they need, and to work out all the other details. There are no other conditions on the offer.
Is the councillor here prepared to back that motion? Councillor Edwards, did you do that? All right, Councillor Edwards makes the motion. Any questions? The details of who and what is obviously public at this time, so if people are interested in knowing more about the idea, the proposal, they would get in contact with the proposed buyer, correct?
Right, and we will be putting out an official media release as soon as we tweak those final details. The realtor who's here tonight has done a lot of work on behalf of the ownership group. I will let council know, reiterate that it's 4 local families that have combined their efforts.
Push the button.
These things just kill me. It's four local families that have combined together to purchase what I believe is the grand lady of the town of Fort Macleod, and I think they see value in it too. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they come up with. So we will be sending out a press release in the next few days once we figure it out and get the purchase offer signed and finalized. But I thank council for approving this one.
We haven't approved it yet.
I'm gonna wait for the vote.
All right, is there any other questions, comments? It is good news to see that building take ownership by someone that will invest. We look forward to being able to see that develop and look forward to working with the buyer. So, CEO Keenan, you have another point.
One last thing, and this is probably the most important thing. The building will continue to be a public facility so that residents and visitors to town will have an opportunity to see her when she's all renovated.
Very good. All right, the motion's on the floor. If there's no further discussion, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Very well. It is the first meeting of the month. Is anyone here wanting to speak to any of their committee appointments? There are some attachments you can preview at your leisure. If there's no other comments, then we will call for a motion to go in camera for a legal item. Councillor Edwards makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.